Could it actually be happening? Is the United States getting ready to sign a minerals deal with Ukraine? After several months, going all the way back to that big blow-up in the Oval Office, we could be seeing this thing officially signed either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. There is officially a new mineral rights deal on the table, and I have to tell you, after reading the now linked versions of this, because I have read different versions of it, but I have put together kind of like the bulk of it all, we now have a good understanding what's in this brand new agreement. And it looks like the United States has officially, we'll just say, gave up in some of the main plans that they originally had for this. Now, for those who don't know, the United States and Ukraine, they were working on a joint investment fund and a project together based around minerals inside of Ukraine. There are many different kinds of minerals, and over time this has evolved to be more than just minerals in the ground, but also gas, oil, and potentially nuclear power. At some points, the United States kind of pushed out the idea that, hey, you know, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it'd be good if it was under our control, because right now Russia has it and it is owned by Ukraine. Though both parties said no to that. Now we're kind of getting that in any kind of new deals, the United States would be there to kind of help assist instead of actually taking ownership over things. We're also referring to that pipeline from the Kursk Oblast inside of Russia that went through Ukraine. And so now in front of me, I have what is essentially the draft of this, which could be signed this afternoon, could be signed tomorrow morning, and still needs to be approved once it is signed by the Ukrainian parliament. So let's go ahead and break down these key points. There's only maybe 7 of them. And as I said before, there's definitely a lot of changes from the last ones. But the biggest one will be when it comes to the United States essentially making its money back. Because if you remember under Donald Trump, he believes that the United States had given Ukraine $300 to $350 billion worth of investment into Ukraine, even though you know as much as I do, that's not true at all. When it comes to investments, maybe for those who don't know, the United States did approve X amount of billions of dollars. But we don't hand that over to Ukraine as a blank check and go, hey, look, here's money, do what you want. Instead, the majority of that money stays here in the United States. That money is spent on older ammunition. The Ukraine comes to the U.S. and goes, hey, look, we need blank. The U.S. then either looks in its stock and they find older ones and they say, you know what? We're going to give you guys the older ones, the things that are about to expire, and then we'll charge you full price for them. That way, we can make brand new ones for us. So as you can see, Ukraine is getting the older stuff, but they're still getting weapons. And the United States instead would use their own money to help build new stuff for our own infrastructure to keep us safe here in the U.S. It's a win-win for everyone, except for Russia, in which this stuff is being used against. And so when it comes to Donald Trump saying that, you know, this is how much we gave Ukraine, not necessarily true. Now, I do want to state for, you know, the clearness of everything here, some money has gone to Ukraine to keep their government going, because why would we provide weapons to a government that doesn't exist anymore, right? And so the story of that $350 billion is not true. It's just what the evaluation is that Donald Trump says that we had given to Ukraine, which is even less than that amount. It's even less of that amount, if that makes any sense. So under this new agreement, the United States won't be retroactively getting paid for anything sent to Ukraine. Which you're probably saying, wow, is this the first time we're seeing the Trump administration kind of say that? It is. It absolutely is. But this agreement is a win-win for the U.S. as well. So let's go ahead and break down what exactly is kind of going on here in the bullet points. First, Ukraine will keep full ownership of all of the assets, including all of the subsoil resources. Before, like I mentioned, The United States talked about potentially taking over Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant or an oil pipeline from Kursk through Ukraine. That's gone. That's off the table. That's no longer even a talking point. Next, there's revenue sharing applying to this, a 50-50 split. But it's only for new licenses. So let's say there's existing contracts through Ukraine, whether they be to Europe, whether they be to other countries outside of Europe. Those agreements, even if they have been paused because of the war, they're still valid. The US will not make a dollar off of that. This is very important because in the other agreements, Ukraine had signed mineral rights deals with like the UK and other countries. And under the other one that was just signed, or not just signed, was going to be signed, the US, they wanted a share of that. And Ukraine's like, we can't. We have an agreement with the UK. We can't do that. And so that is that new wording in there, which means that anything new that comes out of this, the United States will get money from that. Okay, I think that's fair. It says here that profits from oil, gas, and critical minerals are included, but state firms remain under Ukrainian control. Once again, makes sense. It's Ukrainian. It should stay Ukrainian. Anything past this agreement is up for fair gain when it comes to whether it be those new contracts or oil or whatever. Makes sense. Then we talk about the fund. A fund would be created which would support Ukraine's reconstruction, with both countries adding to that fund. So let's say there is a 50-50 split. A percentage of that money will be going to build Ukraine. Now, I'm pretty sure of it. Probably 100% of the 50% that Ukraine is getting out of that fund will be put towards either right back into those businesses or rebuilding Ukraine. On the U.S. side, they are saying, hey, we're going to take a percentage of this money. We're going to make money. We'll also give you guys money to help rebuild. Very fair. Very fair. But there is an end date to this, 10 years. 10 years from when the contract is signed. Now, I'm not quite sure if that signed contract would be the date the war is over or if it's the date that this contract is signed. It's a framework. Remember, this is just a framework. It's loosely written so that it can be interpreted differently once the circumstances of this war are over. Then it comes down into U.S. aid. And I have to say this out in front, there's no security guarantees in this, which is something that Ukraine is like, wait a minute, wait, what? There's no security guarantees? But at the same time, what we're finding out is U.S. aid, including military equipment like air defense systems, will be part of investment into Ukraine. Now, this is worded kind of weirdly because it makes you question, is it something the U.S. is doing to protect their assets inside of Ukraine? Or is it that the United States says to Ukraine, hey, we'll give you this stuff, but you got to pay for it out of the profits that you're making from the resource deal? Once again, it is a framework. And it's kind of open that way to say, look, we want to help support you guys. You know, we'll do some kind of thing here. We don't just know what it is. Now, we know that Donald Trump later does say that this is a very non-complicated deal because Ukraine doesn't have much money. But he says in this, and I quote him, this is during this the cabinet meeting earlier today. He says, but we've made a deal where our money is secure. Where our money is secure. Which is making me believe that the U.S. is saying to Ukraine, we don't have security guarantees in this, but the security guarantees where the money is. Meaning that we're going to protect our assets. And if it just so happens that we have a Patriot missile system there, and it shoots down a Russian aircraft, fighter jet, or a missile, or a bomb, then who be it? We're just protecting our assets. There are so many ways you could interpret this. That's just my mindset. That's just the way that my brain kind of works in all of this. And that's kind of where this agreement ends. Now you're probably saying, well, why hasn't this officially been signed yet? Well, according to the U.S. Treasury Secretary, there was a change. And he actually says, on our side, we're ready to sign this afternoon, referring to, well, when he said this now, an hour ago. He says, but according to them, both sides had to make some last-minute changes to the agreement. We don't know what those changes are. We do know that from the Ukrainian side, the United States wanted them to sign 2 other documents that the parliament wasn't like really fully on board with just yet. They still had to review it, which I know it's very late in Ukraine. At the time of this video, it is, 8:36 p.m.? Supposedly parliament is working overtime to make sure that by tomorrow, this thing could be signed off on. Now remember, it's just a framework, and once this is signed, it still needs to go back to Ukraine, in which the Ukrainian parliament is going to pour all their time and resources into this to make sure that is the best thing for Ukraine, while the United States says it's the best for them already now. But the parliament needs to ratify this deal before any financing details can be agreed to. So we're going to agree to the framework, and then we'll go back and then talk about the finances, and then we'll talk about everything else. And that's where we're at least at this very moment, just so that you are on the same pace as I am. It is 2:37 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's where we sit. It looks very likely that potentially by the end of today, this deal could be signed. If not, could be signed tomorrow. And for the first time ever, and I'm just going to be honest with you, the first time ever, this is a fair deal. This is a fair deal. Ukraine isn't selling their souls for the United States to come in. Ukraine is themselves making some sacrifices by giving up 50% of their profits. At least that's what the number is rolling. But they are getting some kind of security guarantees. They have an agreement with the United States. It's not security guarantees. I know we can't technically say that. Security. I don't even know what they even call that. Everyone's getting something here. It just, because the agreement is so loosely written, it's kind of hard to go out there and tell you exactly what it is. But that's where we sit. That is the mineral rights deal, which I'm not really quite sure what the new name is. The document that I had didn't have the official name. Last time I checked, it was a resources deal, but they're still calling it a minerals deal and everything that's being reported on. So that's where we sit. I want to know your honest opinion, though. What do you think? I know in the comment section I'm live currently at the same time on my TikTok, and I see them coming in saying that don't sign anything with the U.S., but it honestly seems like this might be the only decent agreement we've seen from the United States. And a lot of this probably has to deal with the fact that Donald Trump met with Zelensky in the Vatican in St. Peter's Basilica. We talked about this video, or that photo, very, very big photo. And we're finding out that Donald Trump was told by Zelensky, like, yo, you got to be tougher on them. You got to be tougher on Putin. He doesn't care. He's trying to play you a little bit here. And I think Donald Trump is learning that and is like, yeah, we need to put more of a force onto Putin. You know, you look to see what's happening with this whole victory parade, where Putin's kind of begging Ukraine right now to say, hey, could you not do any drones at this time? Because Putin and Russia are getting ready to welcome in some of the world leaders, and halfway through the parade, do they really want to have air raids going off? And from the Ukrainian point of view, you have to say, you know what? Yeah, we want air raids to go off inside of Russia when these world leaders are in your country. Because you're going to try to, celebrate the end of a war while you're causing a war to your next door neighbor. And some of these people coming to visit are his neighbors. And so they should understand what Russia is doing and the things they're doing to Ukraine. And the best way to do that is to, halfway through a parade, don't send drones into Moscow, the city. Send it into the general area. Spook them. Maybe even spook them now, the day before or days before, so they don't show up. That will tarnish Russia's reputation and make them look bad across the entire world, which ultimately in the end is more added pressure. Because Russia started this war, they can't finish this war, and they look extremely weak. And I know that Russian bots will argue, well, that's not true. Russia still took parts of Ukraine. 3 days. What happened in 3 days? 3 days have become over 3 years. In over 3 years, you guys have lost so many men. Actually, I will give you the updated numbers just so that you have them. According to today's numbers, 951,000 men. Casualties. That's KIL, that is KIA, and injured. You've lost over 10,000 tanks, over 27,000 artillery, 22,000 armed vehicles, 370 aircraft, 335 helicopters, it's separated there, and 28 ships. From a country that you were supposed to take down in 3 days. So yeah, there is no winning in this aspect for Russia, which is why they're holding on to the aspect of, we want all the land. Because they lost everything else. They've lost everything else. But let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I'll be sure to keep you updated. I appreciate everyone who's subscribing to the YouTube channel and turning on notifications. As we're trying to grow this channel, we just hit 27,000 subscribers, so thank you to all 27,000 of you, and hopefully a couple hundred more after this video. But thank you so much for your time. I'll talk to you later. Stay safe.